This video is brought to you by Skillshare. What's up, Wisecrack? Jared here on the set of Earthling Cinema, which, if you didn't know, is its own channel now. We got a lot of requests to do Castlevania after its second season dropped, and gotta say, it's pretty good. We loved its artwork, the references to the games, and some great voice performances.
Getting the good people of Greyshit to commit murder for you. Let's see how you do on your own.
But as we tried to discover a philosophy of the show, we fell a little bit short. The show's writer, Warren Ellis, clearly puts a lot of thought into his work, but as far as we can tell, they haven't really fully formed in Castlevania, yet. Now, despite that, we still wanted to talk about some of the ideas we noticed cropping up that may be further fleshed out in ensuing seasons. So welcome to this Wisecrack Half-Baked edition on Netflix's Castlevania, and as usual, spoilers ahead. Now first, a quick recap. It's 1455 in the land of Wallachia, and Dracula has just found out that his human wife has been burned at the stake for practicing science, or as the Catholic Church like to call it, witchcraft.
She called it all science, Mayor. Lisa Tepesh of Lupu was so far gone that she just couldn't see that it was all given to her by Satan.
So naturally, he goes all John Wick and promises to return in exactly 1 year to kill all mankind.
1 year. Then I'll wipe all human life from the land of Wallachia.
1 year later, and sure enough, an army of the night descends on the country. Meanwhile, Trevor Belmont, the last drunken descendant of a family of vampire hunters, helps a group of nomads, the Speakers, find their missing friend Sypha, who just so happens to be an actual wizard. They team up to fight the forces of darkness with Dracula's estranged half-human son Alucard, until they finally have almost all the playable characters from Castlevania 3. R.I.P. Grant Dynasty. The second season explores the motivations of the various generals Dracula has amassed while Trevor, Sypha, and Alucard sit around in a library arguing like a bunch of nerds. They finally find a way into Dracula's castle, kick some ass, and after a few attacks straight out of a Castlevania boss fight, Dracula surrenders his life to Alucard after realizing what a dick he's been. The first idea we found the show exploring but couldn't quite mold into a definitive thesis was on humanism. I give this one like an 8 out of 10. Warren Ellis is a self-confessed humanist, which is the belief in the value of a human being's own agency and autonomy. Humanists prize rationality and empiricism over superstition. As you might guess, humanists are not big fans of religion, and the Catholic Church is a frequent target with all their historic hatred of science and people choosing when and whom they want to have sex with. So it makes sense that Ellis put this theme in a show set in the 15th century because, let's be honest, it wasn't exactly the high point for the Catholic Church.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition!
Ellis's humanism can be seen in the way science and humanity are portrayed as the true heroes of the story. One of the clever ways he accomplishes this is by taking your typical Christ-like traits and giving them to humans. For example, as a scientist, Lisa wants to learn from Dracula so she can heal the sick, not unlike the miracles of Jesus. When she burns on the cross, she begs Dracula to forgive the people because they know not what they do, reflecting Jesus' famous words on the cross.
They don't know what they're doing!
In contrast to the church, where ordained men with the knowledge of God need to shepherd the ignorant flock, Lisa believes knowledge should be shared with humanity for everyone's benefit. Despite being set long before the Enlightenment, her kind of thinking would be found in philosophers like David Hume and his treatise on human nature, or Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Emile, or On Education, both central to humanist thought. This belief that shared knowledge can help mankind is also contrasted in both the Belmont Library and Dracula's accumulated knowledge, which are treated as precious things to be guarded. A big part of humanism reflected in the show is altruism and love for your fellow man. It's because of his love for his mother and her love for people that Alucard teams up with Sypha and Belmont to defend the humans and even kill his own father.
Because it is what my mother would have wanted.
Sypha's love for people is what motivates her to fight, while it's Trevor's lack of family that makes him the wandering alcoholic that we see. But Trevor is later convinced to give up his misanthropic ways because of his feelings for Sypha.
In the short time we have known each other, you have rediscovered yourself.
The villains in the show are also motivated by love, or at least the lack of it. Dracula losing his wife is the inciting factor of the whole show. The two characters where this motivation of love, or lack of it, is most important is in Isaac and Hector, the two humans who side with the vampires. They both hate humanity enough to want to see it destroyed, purely because a love they once had was taken from them. Hector's beloved animals were always killed by humans, and the man Isaac loved turned that love against him.
Well, I love you too. That's why I do this. This is how I love you.
The reverse is shown to be a redeeming quality too. The show argues that love is the single most humanizing and dehumanizing force in the world, and while we find it hard to argue with that sentiment, there's just not much more to say. The second pitch we explored was on the organization of knowledge. Now we're gonna give this one like a 6 out of 10. The idea is basically what it sounds like. It refers to the different ways we arrange and store the stuff we know, and these different methods are central to the show's conflict. Let's start off by looking at a prominent theme in season 1, science versus religion. Lisa is burned at the stake by the church because she was a scientist, and for the church, any science they don't understand is clearly witchcraft. Then there's Sypha and the Speakers, a nomadic group who bear some resemblance to the Romani people, or Roma, an itinerant group who were dispersed throughout Europe in the Dark Ages and largely remain so today. The Speakers go from town to town spreading their message of altruism and offering aid to those in need.
I told you it was necessary to offer aid to the people.
Like many nomadic people throughout the ages, their histories and tradition are oral, meaning they have no written language to record their past.
My father once got into a fight with one.
True speakers do not fight.
When he tried to convince a speaker to have your oral history transcribed on paper.
Their knowledge is kept and organized by elders, passing teachings and stories down from generation to generation. Because of this, Sypha's people are the custodians of knowledge that has otherwise been lost to history.
This one has the Adamical roots and some of the structure of high remembrance, I think. Give.
I haven't heard of Adamic.
The Speaker's oral tradition might explain why Sypha is able to use a type of magic that other humans can't. Like the Speakers, the Belmonts have passed down their family knowledge from generation to generation, but they prefer writing it down in books and such. The enormous Belmont library hidden beneath the family home is a repository for centuries of knowledge where the three heroes spend almost the whole of the second season. The knowledge inside does eventually help them defeat Dracula, even if Alucard isn't a fan.
It's like a museum dedicated to the extermination of my people, so no, not thrilled.
We even see how Sypha and Trevor mock each other's method of passing on knowledge, only to see them require it later. Sypha resists the need for written history, but admits later that
I am coming to the conclusion that my people are idiots.
While Trevor jokes about the foolishness of the Speaker's oral tradition. In the end though, it's Sypha's oral histories that contain the key to opening the family vault.
I guess the special trick was passed down the generations.
Then there's Dracula. Described as a polymath by Alucard, Dracula hoards scientific knowledge much like the Belmonts, performing experiments that result in teleportation and shattered windows that make you functionally omniscient. Dracula's knowledge is organized not just by written documents and books, like the Belmonts, but his own memory, similar to the way the Speakers retain their knowledge. In the first episode, we see his laboratory and learn how isolated he's become in his work. Lisa then convinces him to reconnect with the human world and to share his knowledge.
Maybe I can teach you to like people again.
But unlike Sypha and Trevor, he, after some convincing, starts to share that knowledge with the outside world. Unfortunately, that doesn't work out too well because when he shares his scientific discoveries, well... Which leads us to the church. They store their knowledge too, but in a hierarchy with the Pope on top. God's will is only to be understood by ordained men, and it's their interpretation of written knowledge, i.e. the Bible, that matters most.
To all intents and purposes, I will be the church.
The church uses this knowledge, only held by a select few, to wield power over the illiterate masses. And this is where we thought we could say that Castlevania's treatment of knowledge bears some resemblance to philosopher Michel Foucault's theory of knowledge and power. This Lex Luthor lookalike explored knowledge and power as separate entities that were inextricably linked. For Foucault, everything has some form of power, now some things more than others, and it's not always obvious how that power influences the world. For instance, as you confess to a priest, you may think of the priest as having power over you since he's judging you, but to Foucault, it's a bit more nuanced than that. As you confess your sin, you create knowledge, perhaps the knowledge that you are playing your Switch during Mass. The knowledge generated by confessing may create guilt in you regardless of the priest's judgment. The knowledge you generated in the confession is what exerts power over you, not only the priest shaking his head at the notion that you spam Isabel's fishing pole. Basically, the priest could stay silent and you'd still feel like shit because the act of confessing itself holds power. In Castlevania, we get a good look at how knowledge interacts with power, but not necessarily this endless cycle of power and knowledge influencing each other that Foucault was talking about. The church is threatened by Lisa and Dracula's power knowledge because their science would reduce the bishop's religious power, so he has Lisa killed to stop her.
How can engines of the devil be physic, woman?
The show constantly suggests that knowledge is a power that must be maintained.
To save your genius, your knowledge, and your will, without question. I am just a forge master. Yours is the wisdom of ages.
It pretty much boils down to knowledge is power, as in, I know these magic words that can set you on fire, which is kinda cliche and not quite what Foucault meant. Maybe if the church had to grapple with how their godly knowledge in part controlled them, this pitch might have worked. Or if Trevor and Sypha explored what their own methods of keeping knowledge meant besides using a magic mirror, it also might have worked better. The final pitch we got is class, and I'll give this one like a 5 out of 10. One of the themes in Bram Stoker's original novel is class. It tells the story of a wealthy count in Romania who literally lives off the blood of the peasants. He then calls for a lawyer so he can buy property in London and do the same thing there. Stoker, who was Irish, lived most of his life in London, and if you know the British, they are obsessed with class. Well, at least that's what our resident Brit Leo tells us. The show's writer Warren Ellis, also British, explores class struggles in his comics like Transmetropolitan and Trees, so it's no surprise that this theme appears in Castlevania. The show paints a graphic picture of the feudal class system in Wallachia, where the few peasants we see literally f*** goats.
He says to me, I know your goat's in love with me. So you said, oh, bullshit. So I says, how? And he says, well, she me, don't she?
And hate the rich families.
The great houses of Greece. Vlad Dracula, an old family. The capital, all run by the great houses.
The rich families, like the Belmonts, think they're better than the poor. Even the vampires have a form of hierarchy, with Dracula as their leader, the vampire generals below him, and the winged horrors beneath them. It's vaguely feudalistic, with vampires bound to serve the vampire who turned them, like Carmilla before she broke the rules and murdered her master.
I was bound to him until I decided to take back my world.
This bond they have, or fealty as it was called, is similar to the way vassals were obligated to their lord in feudal systems. Carmilla also agitates against this class structure because she sees herself as better and more capable than the rest of the vampires. In the end, she even takes Hector as a pet to prove her superiority. Characters who are born into power, typically through inherited knowledge, wealth, or both, are put at the top of the food chain, literally, while those at the bottom are treated like dirt. When the peasants in the tavern discover Trevor is a Belmont, they attack him out of class hatred, and the speakers are treated like dirt because of their status as lowly nomads. This class structure dictates every character's position in the show. Now, while class is an overriding theme in the original book about Dracula and is present in Castlevania 2, we don't really have much more to say. It's discussed by characters and shown to be a thing, we just couldn't find a way to show how it develops into a coherent theme or exploration. So, as you can see, there's a lot of smart things to talk about in Castlevania, and maybe it's just too early in the show for all of this to point to some kind of definitive thesis. Either way, the show is dope, and we can't wait to see what Season 3 offers. Now, whether you're looking to hoard knowledge to better yourself or better humanity, you guys gotta give Skillshare a try. Skillshare is an online learning community that offers classes in business, design, tech, and more. Skillshare is the best place to learn new things to make 2019 your year. I've been jonesing to take a class from who I consider to be the best animators on all of YouTube in a nutshell. Or if you guys already have a great idea but just don't know how to share it with the world, they've got Presentation Essentials, how to share ideas that inspire action. Premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes on must-know topics so you can improve your skills and join the classes and communities that are just right for you and your New Year's goals. Skillshare has been hugely supportive of the work we do, and right now they're giving 2 months for free to the first 500 fans who sign up using the link in the description. So, join the millions of students learning today and head to skl.sh/wisecrack17. And as always, thanks for watching, guys. Peace.